Hi everyone, and in today's video we're going to take an in-depth look at the HUcast. Hi everyone and welcome back to another video for PSO Blueburst. In today's video we're going to continue the series of class guides aimed at people who are coming back to PSO or maybe playing it for the first time. And in today's video what we're going to do is we're going to take a look at the HUcast. So HUcast is the male android hunter class. And again, I've covered this in previous videos, but the way you break the name down is the HU stands for hunter, and then cast is just a suffix that the game uses to denote a male android. So a HUcast is a male android hunter. So what we're going to do is we're going to look at the class, look at the different advantages and disadvantages of the class. I'll go through maybe some recommended gear that you might want to use if you're considering a HUcast, as well as just a general overview of where HUcast is useful and where it might struggle a little bit as well. So first of all, what we'll do is we'll look at some of the stat breakdowns for HUcast. So this here is a HUcast we've just made, fresh out of character creation. So if I just de-equip the mag, and also de-equip the armor as well. So what you've got here, this is your base stats for a HUcast at level 1. So what you want to do is when you look at the stats, you'll notice there's a couple of stats that do jump out. So the first one is the attack power. So HUcast is the highest attack power class in the game, which means that without taking into account any text like shifter or anything like that, HUcast will be dealing the most damage of any class with melee attacks. Next up we have the defense, which starts at 18. We have no mental strength, that's because we're an android, and you can see that's in yellow, so that means it's capped. It means you can never get mental strength. Our ATA, which is our accuracy, starts at 64. Our evade starts at 35, and our luck will always be 10. That only increases through using gear and luck materials. So, out of these stats, where does HUcast really shine? So, at level 1, we actually have the most HP of the hunters. So, we start out with 44 HP, which is actually tied with HUcaseel. So, at level 1, HUcast and HUcaseel both have the same health. That is also, at level 1, that is also the highest overall health of any class, so including rangers and forces as well. Our attack power, again, is the highest in the game. Now, that is actually, at level 1, that's actually tied with every hunter apart from Hugh Newell. So you are tied at 45 attack power with HUcast, HUcaseel, and Humar as well. So our defense is kind of middle of the road. That's at 18 to begin with. Now, 18... that puts us a little bit lower than Hugh Newell, but a little bit higher than Humar, but there's not much difference, honestly, at level 1. MST doesn't matter for us because we're an android, so we'll never get any MST. Our accuracy at 64 is actually, it's slightly higher than Hugh Newell, but is lower than every other hunter, so it is quite low overall. Our evade starts at 35, which is by far the lowest of the hunters. Now, curiously, HUcaseel evade also starts at the same level, which is really strange because HUcaseel ends up with really, really high evade. But HUcast and HUcaseel both start with the lowest evade of hunters at 35. So, when we factor in level 200, this is level 200 without any materials or anything, and obviously without mag boosts. Our HP will go to a maximum of 1,762. Which is the highest of all the hunters, by quite a significant margin as well. The next nearest for hunters is actually the Humar, which is at 1,420, so it's a huge difference in health. So HUcast is a very, very high HP class. It's not the highest in the game, though, but there is one of the ranger classes is actually higher. Actually, a couple of the rangers are higher, actually. If we then move on to TP, obviously our TP is always 0, and that again is just because we have 0 mental strength. We have no reason to use TP. Our attack power at level 200, again, no materials, goes to 1,146, which again is miles ahead of all the other hunters. The next nearest, for context, is Humar, which is at 943. Our defense at level 200 goes to 501. That's kind of middle of the road for hunters, so it's higher than HUcaseel, but and it's actually higher than Humar as well, but it's a little bit behind Hugh Newell. MST, again, we just ignore. Our accuracy goes to 158. Now, 158 is pretty bad. It is actually higher than HUcast, but it is quite a bit behind Humar and way behind HUcast. And then our evade goes to 585, which is by some margin the lowest of the hunters. So what you can see quite quickly is that HUcast is a class that is very, very strong, has a lot of health, but isn't great for defense or evade. If we then factor in maximum stats, HUcast actually maxes HP at just over 2000 at 2012, which is huge. Again, it's not the highest in the game, but it is up there. Attack power goes to 1639, which is by far the biggest of any class in the game. The next nearest to that is Humar, which is 1397. Our defense goes to 601. So the really interesting thing about this is that at maximum stats, HUcast can actually outpace the other hunters. So although it starts off with kind of middle of the road defense, at maximum stats it actually ends up at 601, which is even higher than HUcast, which gets to 589. Now, the reality is that you're probably not going to get that, because to get maximum defense, you probably have to use a ton of defense materials. But if you want to go max stats route, just be aware that HUcast does actually end up the highest of the hunters. For accuracy, we end up at 191. And 191 is actually the lowest of all the hunters. So we're a little bit behind HUcast, but there's not much difference. It's 191 to 199. Just behind Humar at 200, and HUcast ends up at 218, way ahead. And our evade goes to 660, which again is far behind the other hunters. The next lowest is Humar at 756. So what you can see here is that we have a definite focus on HP and attack power, but we are lacking in areas like accuracy and evade. So accuracy is a real problem, kind of similar to HUcast as well. So if you can get weapons with hit, that'll help you a lot. And obviously you just build some decks on your mag to try and get around that as well. In regards to attack power, when you do hit, you're going to absolutely crush things because you do so much damage with the HUcast. Especially if you've got a force or anyone that can do shifter in the party as well, that'll just exacerbate the difference. So you're going to find that you are going to do a ton of damage with HUcast. It's just that you might not have the best accuracy. So your damage will kind of spike because you'll do crazy damage when you do hit, but you might miss a bit as well. So what we'll move on to now is our techniques. Only joking, we're an android, so we don't have any. So since this is the first android class we've covered, we should probably talk about traps. So instead of getting techniques, androids have a few bonuses they get instead. So the first bonus that an android gets is they have native HP regeneration while they're stood still. So if I'll deliberately go and take a hit, just so you can see this work. Come on, Boomer. I love the ragdoll when you get hit like that. So if we run back out this room and just stand still, what you can see now at the top of the screen is HP starting to restore. Now, is this going to be useful? The rate of the HP regen does pick up as you level up. Generally, it's not something you rely on. It's just a nice little bonus to have. Particularly, obviously, as we don't have techniques, we have no access to rester. So sometimes, if you're a little bit banged up, sometimes, say if you're before a boss, it might be worth just standing still for a little bit just to get a bit of HP regen back. Honestly, though, most of the time, you're just going to use a monomate or a dimate or a trimate instead. That's the first thing. The next benefit of androids is that they are immune to certain statuses. So, as an android, you can't be poisoned, and you also can't be paralyzed either. You can, however, still be shocked, and any other status will still work on you as well. It's just that you have immunity to poison and paralysis. Android is basically the hard counter to poison lilies because they can do next to nothing to you. So just be aware of that you are completely immune to poison or paralysis. That also means that then you don't need to hunt anything like a cure paralysis unit because you just have no need for it. The next thing that androids have is access to traps. So if we go into our menu and go to our items, what you'll see is at the bottom of our inventory, we've got these 3 traps. Now, these, although they're in your inventory, they don't actually take space in your inventory. You can see, if you look at your item list here, I've got 5 out of 30. So we've got 1 for the saber, 2 for the frame, 3 for the mag, 4 for the monomates, 5 for the barrier. So these aren't counted in your inventory space, they're just extra slots essentially. Now, there's 3 types of traps, and the amount that you have will depend on a few things. So it depends on what android you're playing, because certain androids specialize towards certain traps more. And it also depends on your level. So as you reach certain level milestones, you'll get access to more traps. So HUcast mainly focuses on damage traps. So we have damage, freeze, and confuse traps. So damage traps are what you would expect. So basically, you can access these from the quick menu as well. So we pop the trap down. You can actually shoot these traps as well to detonate them. You can see that it detonates and does a bit of damage to the opponent. So that's the type of trap that HUcast specializes in. So they get slightly faster growth on those. So the other traps you've got is you have freeze traps, which, as the name suggests, freeze enemies. And confuse traps will confuse enemies and make them start attacking each other for a few seconds. So traps are absolutely amazing for just dealing with large groups of mobs. Particularly on ranger classes, honestly, because if you use a multi-target gun, you can detonate the trap really, really easily while you're shooting the opponent as well. With hunters, it's a little bit more awkward because you generally have to use like a handgun or something to detonate them reliably. They do just detonate after a few seconds as well, but quite often enemies will just walk out the way of them if you don't detonate them. So they are very, very useful for dealing with spawns, and quite a lot of your damage and sort of opportunities will come from using traps. So quite often, because HUcast has a problem with its accuracy, if you drop a freeze trap on an enemy, that enemy is then completely still and you won't really miss it very much. So you can drop a freeze trap and then just wail on it while it's frozen. Alternatively, if you want to mix enemies up, you can use a confuse trap and then pick them off while they're all attacking each other. So there is a lot of advantages to using these traps. And all casts get these. It's just that each cast specializes in certain traps a little bit more. That doesn't mean that you should ignore freeze traps and confuse traps on HUcast, though they are very useful and probably more useful than damage traps, honestly. It's just that HUcast is designed to have slightly more damage traps than other androids. So the next benefit that you have as an android is you actually are able to see traps. So obviously, the ones that we create, we can see, obviously, but in areas that have traps in the corridors or anything, or any of the rooms, you can actually see them as an android. So that allows you to just take them out without worrying about them. Whereas with, for example, with the HUnewell, you wouldn't be able to see them. You'd have to use a trap vision to see them. Androids have that built in. The next thing that you have is you actually have boosts to certain types of special attack, and you have reductions on certain types of special as well. And this applies to ultimate mode difficulty. So with androids, you actually get a boost to the effectiveness of any confuse, paralysis, or freeze specials. I think you also you do actually steal some more experience as well with androids. However, the downside to that is that any devils or demon specials which reduce enemy HP, their effectiveness is reduced on an android. So normally, devils will reduce by half, and demons will reduce by 75%. Whereas on an android, devils only cuts by 25% and demons only cuts by 45%. So demons and devils are not going to be as useful, but still decent. But you'll have a big boost to your confuse, paralysis, and freeze specials. So just bear that in mind if you are playing an android. So ideally, if you can use anything that's got any paralysis specials, you're going to get more mileage out of them. So let's quickly talk about some gear options for HUcast. So what I'll do is I'll just equip a few things and we'll just do a little bit of playthrough just while I talk about this. So a couple of things you definitely want to look out for. As with any hunter, anything that increases your battle speed is always going to be useful for you to help you get those hits in. So ideally, something like either a Heavenly Battle, which boosts your attack speed by 40%, or something like a V101 will always be useful for you. So a V101 essentially gives you a Heavenly Battle, but also gives you some stat boosts as well. It is harder to get than a Heavenly Battle though, so you can always hunt a Heavenly Battle first and then move on to V101 later. Additionally, there is a unit called Smart Link, which is really, really useful for hunters. So later in the game, certain range weapons like mech guns are really, really useful. The downside is that because of HUcast accuracy problems, it can be difficult to leverage that. So what Smart Link does is it actually removes there's a negative penalty that hunters have when they're using ranged weapons, and Smart Link removes that, which just makes it so that you are much more capable with ranged weapons. So that's a potential thing you can go for as well with HUcast if you want to use any ranged weapons. There is also things like, I've mentioned this before, but the Disco of Braveman. So Disco of Braveman is a pretty easy to get slicer with the Berserk special. If you can grab one of those with hit, particularly with hit for HUcast, because you're going to need the extra accuracy. That is a fantastic weapon just because it's a multi-target weapon that has Berserk. There is also an armor you can actually combine that with called 13, which gives you some set bonuses as well. So that could be worth hunting as well. There is also later on, so obviously one of the downsides of using an Android is that you have no support techniques, so you don't have access to shifter and D-band. There is, however, a weapon that can actually help you out with that. So there is a dagger weapon called S-Red Blades, which are a drop from Ultimate Mines. They drop as a body part and you have to convert them. But their special casts I think it's a level 3. Could be wrong on that, but I think it's a level 3 shifter or D-band as a special attack. So it's an easy way of getting that shifter and D-band boost. And with HUcast, because you've got so much attack power anywhere, it doesn't really matter that it's only a low-level shifter. Should be a nice little boost for you anyway. And it also has the advantage of they are just reasonably strong weapons anyway. Now, the Jagger animation is not fantastic, but they are still a decent weapon. But you are going to use them mainly for the special attack. Other things you could go for is... This is more for endgame, really, but weapons like Dark Flow are quite interesting with HUcast. So, Dark Flow is a weapon... You basically make a normal sword, and then you use the Parasitic Gene Flow on it to make it into a Dark Flow. Now, Dark Flow is a very, very strong weapon, and it has a special where it fires like a wave that hits multiple targets, but you can only use it when you're on really, really low HP. Now, for a lot of characters, it's very, very risky using Dark Flow because you have to be on, I think it's about 12% HP or so, around there. So it's very, very low health you have to stay on to be able to use the special. Because HUcast has so much health, at 12% HP, it'll still have a significant amount more health than other classes. So it's more viable to use Dark Flow with HUcast, and obviously the damage is going to be high as well. So that's one you can go for. There is also, if you just want big damage, another option is weapons like, so again, sacrificial weapons like the Disco Braveman that I mentioned. Zanba is another good option. So Zanba is a sword with a Berserk special that's only usable by male hunters, so only Humara HUcast can use it. So that's one option. There is also Vijaya. And basically it's a partisan with a charge special, so you basically use money to do more damage. But the VIA has like a different type of charge, so instead of using a couple of hundred Mazetta, it uses 10,000, but it has like a massive modifier on the damage from that. I believe, I can't remember the exact numbers offhand, but I believe it's about a ×5 something modifier. So you do incredibly high damage with it. So that's one option. Again, leveraging the massive attack power that HUcast has into a sacrificial special will get you huge damage numbers and help you clear things out a lot quicker. So there is also, if we're talking defensive gear, there is a shield item that actually drops in normal called S-Parts version 201. It's a very, very rare drop from a guild chick. You know, it's like 1 in 10,000 or something. So you are going to have to spend some time in normal hunting that. But what it does is it's actually a barrier that gives you a boost in accuracy. So it's a big help to HUcast just because it helps to offset some of your accuracy problems. So I would definitely consider going for S-Parts. You might be able to trade for one as well and get it that way. That might be the easy way of doing it instead of hunting normal. Later on, obviously, you can change it out for an armor like Red Ring, because Red Ring is absolutely busted. But the reality is that you can't even use Red Ring until like level 180 something. So realistically, S-Parts is probably going to be what you're going to go with for the majority of the time. Obviously, weapons like Excalibur are always going to be fantastic on HUcast. Again, you've got the sacrificial special, along with it being one of the strongest weapons in the game, and it hitting 3 targets. It's an incredibly strong weapon. So that's just a few examples of gear that you might want to use. You can also use units like V501, V502 to boost the effectiveness of your special attacks. So that'll help you for any of those specials that you've got boosts in already. So you could leverage V501 or V502 into landing those more often. If you're going with something like paralysis, you could even use something like Red Sword. So Red Sword has a paralysis special and obviously hits multiple targets. With the boost to paralysis specials that you have with Android, using something like V501 can actually be really good. Can actually be really, really helpful. You're never necessarily going to be as useful as, say, a Ranger with Spread Needle, crowd control, but it's a way of dealing with spawns that you need to slow down. So there's other options as well. So obviously some enemies, it's easy to take care of them with techs. So there are certain weapons that actually cast techniques as a special attack. So quite a lot of them will need mental strength to use, which obviously you can't because you don't have any. But weapons like Twin Blaze, or even something like Dragon's Claw. Dragon's Claw casts Fire, Twin Blaze casts Giffey. Twin Blaze is quite useful because Giffey is really good at sort of flinching enemies and taking care of things around you and just stopping things from attacking you. So you can just pop the Giffey every now and again to flinch enemies and then take care of them while they're flinched. So that's really, really nice as well. So just one more quick note on the Twin Blaze that I mentioned earlier. One other thing that's really beneficial about the Twin Blaze, with it having the Giffey special, is it actually works brilliantly with your traps. So because Giffey hits an area of effect all around you, if you drop a trap and then use the Twin Blaze special, you'll actually automatically detonate the traps. So it's a way of quickly detonating those traps and setting up those spawns for you. So what you could do is you could go into a room, drop a freeze trap, use the Twin Blaze special to detonate it, and then just wail on the enemies with a Berserk special or something while they're frozen. So that's a really, really good strat to use with HUcast. So that's another benefit of using that Twin Blaze. You can detonate your traps with any weapon that you want to use, but typically it's easier to use with ranged weapons or things like Giffey that do it automatically. Obviously, I say this in every Hunter video, but obviously if you can get high hit percentage charge mech guns, that will always be fantastic for you as well. They're always going to be really, really good mileage. Now, in regards to mag, you could probably go with the typical sort of 5, 145, 50 mag. In regards to 5 defense, 145 power, 50 dex, no mind. Obviously, you don't need mind because you've got no mental strength. At lower level, you could potentially build a bit more dex in if you wanted to, just to help you overcome the accuracy problems at lower level. Later on, though, you can probably get away with just using a standard power mag, really. There's nothing overly special you need. For Photon Blast, I would definitely recommend going with Myla and Eula, because obviously you have no access to Shifter and D-Band outside of those S-Red blades normally. So having that level 21 Shifter and D-Band on a HUcast is going to be huge, because you already have massive amounts of attack power anyway, and getting that level 21 Shifter is just going to make you do stupid damage. Obviously, when it runs out, you won't be able to renew it until you've got another Photon Blast again, but it's still fantastic for those few minutes that it's active. For the other two Photon Blast, it's up to you really. I would typically just go with the usual ones, Estella and Pillar. They're a really, really easy choice, and that's kind of a typical mag setup that works for a lot of classes. So I would probably just go with those three, so just Estella, Pillar, Malleula. It could also be really, really helpful to have mags that either cast Shifter and D-Band as a trigger, or Invincibility. I would probably lean more towards Invincibility, just because the Shifter and D-Band that mags cast don't tend to last very long. So any mag that triggers Invincibility often, so ones like Nidra, or Sato, or Telusis. And Telusis is really good as well because it has a set with Excalibur. So if you can get Excalibur as well, that's a fantastic setup for HUcast. So that's just some gear that you could find useful if you are playing this class. Generally, you just want to be focusing on just high damage weapons, and just focusing on that massive amount of attack power that you've got. And anything you can use to sort of leverage the issues with accuracy as well. Anything you can do to help you hit a bit easier, whether that's by using arm units or Smart Link for range weapons, or using weapons that have hit percentage. All of those are going to help you land those big hits more often. So that's what you want to be focusing on with HUcast, in my opinion. Other gear you could look into as well. You could also look into things that have set boosts. So I mentioned the Disco and Braveman and 13 boost earlier, but you could also look into things like the Blue Odoshi armor, which That is a fantastic armor because it has reasonable stats. It has a built-in Heavenly Battle, which means you don't need to waste a slot using a Heavenly Battle. And it also has a set boost with certain weapons as well. So it's mainly weapons like, I believe it's weapons like Sanga and Yasha. So it has a set boost with those. And you can also then further that set boost by using armor units like Proof of Sword Saint, which then, again, has a set effect with certain weapon types. So you can always look into those kind of set boosts as well, just to try and get the most mileage you can. In the earlier game, you could also use set boosts like the Del Saber set, so the Shielded Del Saber with the Del Saber's Buster. That will give you a fantastic little single target weapon for early game, and it'll also give you a really decent shield for dark resistance once you get to ultimate as well. Later on, I would definitely ditch the Del Saber's Buster for something else, but early game, it could be a really little useful bit of gear for you. So where does HUcast excel? So we've already mentioned you have a ton of health and an absolute ton of attack power. That makes HUcast fantastic boss killers. They're also really good for just mowing through spawns of enemies. If you're using weapons like Yunchang, which is a Berserk Partisan, or Zanba, or even something like Excalibur, you're going to absolutely mow through mobs. Faster than any other hunter could get near to, really. So that is the main advantage of HUcast. You are just a complete DPS machine. Just the damage that this class puts out is just so far in advance of any other hunter. The downside of HUcast is, so obviously as a cast you don't have access to any techniques, which means that your healing is limited. You can only heal with monomates, dimates, trimates, and star atomizers. Now, effectively, that is a lot of heals that you can use, and you shouldn't really be going through that many heals in a typical run. But just be aware that you are relying solely on those mate items to heal you. As well as that HP regen, but that's only if you stood still, and it's not really fast enough to rely on. Other downsides is, obviously, because you have no mental strength as an android, it locks you out of any gear that requires mental strength to use. Now, that's not going to be a huge issue with HUcast, because a lot of your gear is going to be attack power requirements anyway. But just be aware of that if there's any gear that requires mental strength or that requires TP to use, you can't use it. So an example of where that screws you over a little bit is armors like Aura Field. So Aura Field is a really, really good armor with high defense, but it drains your TP over time. Now, because HUcast has no TP, because you don't have any mental strength that's tied to that TP, you can't use Aura Field because of that, because it's got no TP to drain. However, you can get around that by leveraging that HP. So instead of using an Aura Field, for example, you could use something like a Luminous Field, which is another really, really good armor that drains your HP slowly over time. Because you've got so much HP anyway, it just doesn't really matter to HUcast at all. So that's what I would definitely focus on. So if you're looking for a class that dominates bosses and just mows through spawns, HUcast is probably one of the classes for you. Just be aware that it's a self-sufficient class in that it can keep itself alive fine with monomates and dimates and so on, but it's nowhere near as self-sufficient as a class like HUnewell that has access to all those support techniques. You're not going to be able to weaken any enemies with gelling. You're not going to be able to reduce their defense. You can't buff yourself outside of a couple of bits of gear that can do it for you. The reality is that for most areas, HUcast just doesn't need that because you're so strong anywhere. So if you're looking for a great boss killing class or one that can just mow through areas for you, definitely consider giving HUcast a try. In parties, it shines in pretty much any party because it's the highest attack power class. It's always going to be preferable to a lot of other hunters in a difficult quest because you're just going to kill the enemies faster. Especially paired up with a Force, that combination of level 30 shifter with HUcast's attack power is going to be ridiculous. And you'll find that HUcast will definitely take the place of other hunters in an ideal party. So the only time I would say that HUcast is maybe outclassed is if you're in a party that doesn't have a Force and you want a class that can support your team. Maybe you want to look into one of the female classes like HUnewell or Remal. But generally, HUcast is a really, really solid class. And if your focus is just on doing damage and killing stuff very, very hard, then HUcast is probably the class I would recommend you to go for. So I hope that's been relatively useful. I am going to cover all the different PSO classes, so I've done a few classes already that are already on my channel, but we're going to work through them all over the next few weeks. So if you find it useful, please consider liking or subscribing to the channel. It really, really helps out. I do also have a Twitter, which is @SectionSkylie, and I tend to post when I'm going live or any updates on there. And I also live stream once a week on YouTube as well, which again is just on this channel. And we typically live stream either PSO or PSO2 New Genesis, where I am an official NGS content creator for that as well. So yeah, if you enjoyed the video, consider liking or subscribing, but otherwise, I'll see you guys in the next video.